Welcome one and all to another day here at The Damage Report. I remain John Idarola, and I'm very lucky to be joined on this fine Thursday by contributor to The Breakdown, Miranda Scholl. Welcome back to The Damage Report.
Thanks for having me, good to be here.
Glad to have you here, glad to have you joining me with an attitude of interest in bringing some levity to the news. We're gonna try our best to do that.
Absolutely, love to bring some light to anything we can.
Exactly, and we were talking before the show about some of your recent work on The Breakdown. I want to take any opportunity I can to remind people that while we still have Rebel HQ has now grown so big that it needed to enter a secondary as well. So Rebel HQ exists, The Breakdown now exists. What's some of the recent work that you've done on The Breakdown that people can go check out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I cover a lot of social issues as opposed to political issues, which there are certainly plenty of. We're trying to make it lighter. I know the news is the news, but we're trying to get in that, that buoyancy and that laugh wherever we can. So I have recent videos, on Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I like to cover Republican and religious hypocrisy is a lot of big topics for mine, and LGBTQ issues as well.
I don't know where you could come up with an example of religious hypocrisy in America. I don't think that's possible, but I like a challenge, so go forth. We'll check in a few years and see if you've identified anything. By the way, you know what I would like to suggest? Because you've got the behemoth, Rebel HQ. Now you got the young upstarts in The Breakdown. Start up a feud. You should invade their channel or something, mess with them a little bit. I'd like to see a little bit of a rivalry develop.
Yeah, it's like when sports teams and they pull pranks on each other and it's always a rivalry. Yep. We should absolutely do that.
I'm 100% steal their goat.
Yeah,
I want to see it. Okay, I grew up watching a lot of wrestling, so if you need help figuring these things out, I'll see what I can do. Absolutely. In any event, thank you, dear audience, for being here. We've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about through the course of this hour. Not only Ron DeSantis now facing a potential big old lawsuit, that's gonna be fun. The Senate Democratic primary here in California is already heating up, and I'm gonna be heating up over it. Joe Manchin being attacked, I'm here for that. Kristen Sinema being attacked, I'm even more here for that as well. And that's just in the first hour. We're also gonna be engaging with the fact that Donald Trump is apparently coming back to Facebook. Isn't that fun? It would affect me more if I literally ever went on Facebook, but we'll be talking about it regardless. And then we've got the aftermath. Newsmax is in some financial trouble, and we've got woke cartoon bears to talk about. So in advance of all of that, please hit the like button and share the stream so that people know we're live. And if you want to send us any comments, tweets, or super chats, either for us to respond to or for a chance, if you're a member, to get one of those Blue Apron gift cards, you can send those in. We're looking for insightful and or funny and or notable comments, and we'll be responding to some of those as we go. But with all that said, Miranda, are you ready to start the show?
I am ready as I'll ever be. Let's jump into it.
Let's do it. Let's jump right into this.
We're here to give notice to Governor DeSantis that if he does not negotiate with the College Board to allow AP African American Studies to be taught in the classrooms across the state of Florida, that these three young people will be the lead plaintiffs in a historic lawsuit.
So there you have it, an announcement with an accompanying potential future lawsuit against Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida. You see there, civil rights attorney Ben Crump joined by a number of students who I think rightfully are infuriated by Ron DeSantis's 100% partisan choice to effectively eliminate AP African Studies. Just coincidentally, there was African American Studies and a whole bunch of other ones remain. He just, for some reason, coincidentally chose that one. I don't know, I can't read his mind, I can't say exactly why, but if they don't figure out a way through this impasse to allow the coursework to return, then he could be facing that lawsuit. And here's a little bit more from the announcement.
Governor DeSantis, are you really trying to lead us into an era akin to communism that provides censorship of free thoughts? are we going to make sure that Governor DeSantis understands that we will stand on the American principles of the free exchange of ideas, whether those are ideals and culture of European history, whether those are ideals and culture of German history, whether those are ideals and culture of Japanese history, whether those are ideals and culture of Brazilian, Canadian, everybody who is here in America, you have a right to have your culture, your history respected and taught to the children of America.
I think that Ben Crump makes a great point that all of those histories and cultures should be explained. Of course, most will continue to be taught in Florida schools for right now until the right wing decides that one of those cultures should be the punching bag for a year or two, and then they'll ban that as well. We find ourselves in a complicated situation wherein the baked in historic fact that African Americans in America have had to contend with centuries of racism necessarily means that teaching the history of that community means talking about that racism, and that can't be allowed. Isn't that amazing? That the racism of the past can pay dividends of being able to ignore entire communities' histories in the present. It's a very efficient way to ruin the next generation. In any event, we don't know yet that this lawsuit will actually happen. Ron DeSantis and the state of Florida have an opportunity to come back off the brink in their propagandistic effort to control what students have access to. Right now, though, Miranda, what do you think?
I think I'm probably thinking what a lot of our viewers are thinking and what you're probably thinking. I'm glad that the lawsuit is being at least brought forth and talked about, because we can say we don't like what's happening. We can say that we hate that they're trying to ban what they call critical race theory. But if nothing's actually being done, it's just going to happen anyway. So I'm really glad that they're bringing this lawsuit forth. And this makes me so angry. I remember, this reminds me, my little cousins in school, I read through their history books once, and the Trail of Tears was no longer called the Trail of Tears. It was a picture, a drawing of, indigenous Americans and the white settlers shaking hands. And it said that they agreed to vacate, basically, and give up their land. And this is the same direction we're headed with critical race theory. Critical race theory is not new. It's just the truth of how this country was founded. The name critical race theory is new, but it's just teaching the truth. And the fact that the Florida Department of Education said they'd open the discussion if they develop a curriculum with lawful, historically accurate content was the worst part of this article for me, because it is historically accurate content. So what are they willing to accept as accurate content? They're just it's gonna turn into, people in Africa heard of new opportunities in America and agreed to get on boats to come here for opportunity. Like it's gonna completely erase the entire reality of what happened, and it's infuriating. So I'm really, really glad that they're at least bringing a lawsuit forth.
Exactly, and look, there has to be a response to this. I like that, since Ben Crump is getting involved, this lawsuit could well happen, and probably almost certainly will. That raises it to a topic of a national conversation that seems necessary, but it is not lost on me that that's what the right wants, because, and this is a really dark thing to have to accept. They know how racist this is, and they think, goody goody, that's why we're doing it. So Ron DeSantis thinks that his odds of becoming president will go up at least a little bit if he is able to successfully convince millions and millions of Americans that he despises African Americans and doesn't want any of their history to be told. That is an actual calculation, a thought process he went through. This is not some accident that he has, like a pit that he's accidentally fallen into or anything. This is a strategy based on his political ambitions and the political ambitions of a lot of other people around him who see money and clout and power and influence to be gained if they are seen to be part of this effort to root out wokeness, and by that I mean reality. So that's fun. So anyway, we have been talking about this. their arguments about why the class can't be taught and all that on their face BS. They've delivered a little bit more granular detail about it, which I love, and we're gonna be jumping into that in just a sec. But let's move forward to another section of this. There's been rightly a lot of criticism of Ron DeSantis's decision to root out AP African American Studies. You've not only got this potential lawsuit, you've got dozens of students gathered at a Stop the Black Attack rally in Tallahassee that was organized by a voting rights advocacy group called Equal Ground. And at that, you had some politicians and activists in the state speaking out against this effort. State Senator Chevron Jones said, "These are the issues that's being ignored because we have to deal with the promotion of Jim Crow 3.0 by people who don't know and don't care about what's happening in Black communities, but they desire to referee how you teach our history." And look, again, it's probably pointless to try to convince white conservatives that there is no harm to be found in acknowledging reality, whether in the past or in the present. Like the fact that you think acknowledging that racism exists, bigotry exists, structural racism exists, reflects poorly on you, that is about you right now. I don't know why you listen to people who have convinced you that if racism exists in the past, then that's a problem for you now, unless this is really about you knowing what your current day positions are. And this is less about really being concerned about what happened 60 years ago and more about how you feel about individuals in certain communities today. And so that I think is the issue that we're facing. Ron DeSantis is not terrified that you'll learn about the civil rights movement or anything like that. He's one of the elites. He understands that this is a grift, this is a con, this is a tool to be used. And they have spent literally years and years and years on Fox News trying to get white conservatives to be so weak, to be so fragile that they would believe that any acknowledgement of past racism is going to somehow doom them now. That said, Ron DeSantis and his allies are responding to some of these recent developments. Take a look at this.
In the state of Florida, our education standards not only don't prevent, but they require teaching Black history, all the important things. That's part of our core curriculum. This was a separate course on top of that for advanced placement credit. And the issue is we have guidelines and standards in Florida. We want education, not indoctrination. If you fall on the side of indoctrination, we're going to decline. If it's education, then we will do this course. So when I heard it didn't meet the standards, I figured, yeah, they may be doing serious. It's way more than that. This course on Black history, what's one of the lessons about? Queer theory. Now, who would say that an important part of Black history is queer theory? That is somebody pushing an agenda on our kids. And so when you look to see they have stuff about intersectionality, abolishing prisons, that's a political agenda. And so that's the wrong side of the line for Florida standards. We believe in teaching kids facts and how to think, but we don't believe they should have an agenda imposed on them. When you try to use Black history to shoehorn in queer theory, you are clearly trying to use that for political purposes.
I haven't taken the course, and few will be allowed to in the future if people like him gain more political power. I would guess, though, that the answer to the rhetorical question, it's rhetorical because he's an incurious person. He's not actually interested in learning. The answer to the question, who believes that queer theory is an important part of African American history, is probably African American scholars. If I had to guess, I would say that actual experts who study and research this and write on it, they apparently seem to think it's an important part of it. And you not being a member of that community, not being a person who has done any research whatsoever in it, maybe it shouldn't be up to you what is a part of that curriculum. Maybe respected scholars from inside of that community should be making those sorts of determinations. And again, I would just point out, even if you're watching this and this particular topic maybe isn't super important to you or whatever, you should at least acknowledge that in the same way that what the media covers isn't necessarily as important as what they don't choose to cover, how crucial that is in shaping what people think about America and American politics. When he says we're not gonna have kids have an agenda put on them, he is pretending, and this is an intentional performance, that the only way that propaganda can work, the only way an agenda can be put forward is what you choose to teach, as if blocking certain topics, certain authors, certain books, certain lesson plans is not a part of some sort of agenda. That's not propaganda. I would argue that like literally mandating ignorance is a far more effective tool of propaganda than just what book happens to be on a syllabus. In any event, Miranda, what did you think about his argument there?
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it reminds me of in Christian schools, certain Christian schools, they're trying to prevent children from being exposed to classmates who have same-sex parents, because it's the same as being exposed to information, being exposed to books. Then they can have the information and operate off their own experiences and their own thoughts, which is exactly what they're saying is not going to happen if you expose them, and that they're children, we have to protect them, and there's an agenda being put on them. And I just did a story on them trying to keep the segregation in schools as far as LGBTQ kids and kids with LGBTQ parents. And he came out and said straight up, it's easier basically to teach children what we want them to believe if they don't have access to what we're teaching about. And so it's the same thing. It's much, much easier to teach someone, especially when they're young, to hate or to discriminate if they don't have access to the whole truth, if they don't have access to the people that they're talking about. And so if you take away the education and the books, and you're right, if you block that information, if you ban those books in those classes, it's much easier to manipulate those kids into thinking what you want them to think. So and this is what the Republicans do all the time, they're projecting what they say they're afraid of the Democrats doing is what they are doing.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I want to move ahead to another person making these sorts of arguments. Obviously, there are those who are on Ron DeSantis' side when it comes to banning the teaching of AP African American history. You have one, I believe State Senator Manny Diaz Jr. says, despite the lies from the Biden White House, Florida rejected an AP course filled with critical race theory and other obvious violations of Florida law. We proudly require the teaching of African American history. We do not accept woke indoctrination masquerading as education. So look, it is already on its face discussing that whoever the hell this person is an eager participant in this racist manipulation and contortion of history. But I also love like the attempted argument there. What they are admitting is we proudly require the teaching of African American history. What they're saying is, for years, ever since we finally stopped trying to block like MLK Day from being a day, you know how like every year we trot out a fake version of him that we find palatable and then we applaud it and ignore everything else about his history? What if we did that to the entire community's history? And that's what they're doing. We're going to require the teaching of whatever form of African American history we find to be convenient, that is consistent with the narratives that we accept in politics, that isn't a challenge to the millionaires and billionaires who we represent. We'll allow, even require that sort of history. We're gonna block everything else, anything that is a challenge to all of that, even if it is the teachings of some of the most notable people in this history. And we have examples, by the way, because you might recall we were playing earlier Ron DeSantis saying, I thought initially it was bad, but my God, the stuff they found. Well, now because they're under pressure, they need to come up with some sort of argument as to what was so egregious about this that the government had to step in and ban the teaching of this course. This government that believes so much in freedom of speech and all of that stuff. So let's jump around in a few of these things. So, okay, there's included reading in Black Queer Studies by Roderick Ferguson. And they quote this as being unacceptable. We have to encourage and develop practices whereby queerness isn't a surrender to the status quo of race, class, gender, and sexuality. It means building forms of queerness that reject the given realities of the government and the market. Dear God, no. No, it can't be allowed that a kid would consider that or something because it's got the word queer in it, I guess. I don't know. In Movements for Black Lives, Leslie K. Jones apparently writes, quote, every day, Black people produce an unquantifiable amount of content for the same social media corporations that reproduce the white supremacist superstructure that oppress us. That is objectively true. But by the way, like even if you wanted to have a debate about the last 10 years of social media or whatever, like that is what Twitter is right now. That is literally what the day-to-day experience on Twitter is. No, kids cannot consider the possibility that engaging in social media is potentially giving power to people who don't share your interests. There's a lot of examples of this, including bell hooks, and there was a talk about reparations. Dear God, no. A mention of the fact that there are black communists in Alabama. Well, no, you can't acknowledge that. I mean, it's a fact, but you can't acknowledge that they exist. Look, nobody who's pushing for these sorts of bans, like Ron DeSantis, is actually terrified of this stuff. That would be bad enough. That would be baby-brained enough if they were actually horrified of somebody reading a book that they themselves will never read. Pretending to be terrified by it, though, that seems worse to me. Pretending to be so horrified of the truth, of reality, of critical thought, of discussion, of expanding the bounds of your understanding of America's history, that is just truly pathetic. And that is the movement that they are eagerly building. Miranda, any final thoughts on this topic?
No, you're so right. It's really awful to see all of these elite politicians who don't actually care about whatever the gay agenda that doesn't exist. The agenda is just to exist and live. And critical race theory and trans people, they don't actually care. They're just utilizing these things and teaching fear about them to their constituents so that they can keep and gain more and more power, which in turn equals more and more money. It's just disgusting.
Yeah. I'm gonna, as we transition to a break, I'm gonna leave everyone with a fun bit of irony that I've pointed out many times through all of this. And what I love about this, and by love I mean it makes me want to vomit, is that their argument that they're making is, how dare you say that there is structural racism, that the government would do something racist. How dare you say that? It enrages me that you say it. It makes me so mad that the state government is going to ban the teaching of one racist history. It is an act of structural racism being used to suppress talk of structural racism. I'm sure that is not lost on them either, but it's important that we bear it in mind. More news coming up, don't go anywhere. Okay, let's get to some more political drums, starting off with this.
I've always believed that what's right matters, that the truth matters, and that decency matters.
Oh no. 5 or 6 seconds into that video, I think we all know where this is going. Adam Schiff is gonna be running in the Democratic primary to replace Dianne Feinstein in California. And isn't that fun? Now, up until this point, of course, we, as we'll get into, we have Katie Porter and we have Barbara Lee, and in theory, they could have a primary and they could have debates that are substantive about a number of different interesting substantive points. Now, in theory, of course, Adam Schiff could run the same sort of campaign, but I'm gonna guess, based on the rest of his ad, that that's probably not what this is gonna be about. Take a look and you can decide.
And when a dangerous demagogue tried to undermine our democracy, I wasn't about to let him. You can't trust this president to do the right thing, not for 1 minute, not for one election, not for the sake of our country.
Adam Schiff is a corrupt politician.
Adam Schiff is a modern day Joe McCarthy.
Little pencil neck.
A national disgrace. He is unfit to hold office.
Then I took on the biggest job of my life, impeaching Donald J. Trump.
Adam Schiff did masterfully an incredible job.
I found it very powerful.
We have proven Donald Trump guilty. Now do impartial justice and convict him. After all that, I wish I could say the threat of MAGA extremists is over. It is not. Today's Republican Party is gutting the middle class, threatening our democracy. They aren't going to stop. We have to stop them.
Yeah, it's gonna be about that stuff. Which, look, did he do those things? Yes, he did those things. Yes, he stood up to Trump, and that is good. That is necessary. He's received a lot of accolades for that, and a lot of money, and a lot of whatever it is that people like him like. And that's all fine. But that's just one thing. And is that really going to be going forward for the next 6, 12, 18, 36 years that he would be senator? Is that the chief concern going forward for the millions and millions and millions of residents of California? I would argue probably not. Now, to be fair, he briefly mentioned that he voted in favor of Obamacare. Is he not merciful? I assume he's implying that there was a possibility that he would have voted against that. It wasn't his bill. Why is he taking credit for that? And I think he mentioned something about wanting to like lower inflation, like very brief mentions of other things. The vast bulk of the ad was about him standing up to Trump. Again, he's not talking about running for president against Trump. He's talking about running to be the Democrat representing maybe the most progressive state in America. And his focus is entirely on the fact that he's been opposed to Trump. I don't love it. Miranda, what do you think?
I think it's the bare minimum, and sadly, not enough politicians have stood up to Trump in their time. But it still feels like it's scraps. He's like, but I'm the guy. I stood up against Trump. Vote for me. That's what I did. I stood up, and I'm like, yeah, okay. What else did you do? How else have you bettered people's lives? And he's like, I stood up to Trump, and that seems to be his only real argument. Which, it's not a bad argument. And, there are definitely worse people, but you're right. It's like the most progressive area. And you're running, against people like Katie Porter, who is, kind of a personal favorite of mine. And I mean, okay, sure, run your campaign. I think there's a lot of backing behind people like Katie Porter, Barbara Lee. And so hopefully, for me personally, hopefully that'll just sail them right through. But yeah, I did have a little giggle when I saw his ad as well.
Yeah, the little, oh no, they have him walking slowly towards the camera. He's definitely running for Senate.
It's like one of those inspirational videos. He's like, this product saved my life. And if you're having issues, like the uplifting music definitely felt like he was trying to sell me like some health
medication.
Products. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're experiencing a case of Trump, and then in the background he's like windsurfing. Something. And I love in your example of his accomplishments that he twice stood up to Trump, which implies that he sat down at some point in the middle there. By the way, if you're just going to like choose a person who's been the most opposed to Trump, I feel like I've done more hours on it than Adam Schiff. I've said really unfair stuff about Trump, and I commit to you that I will continue to do that. I will launch substantive attacks against him. I will launch deeply personal attacks against him. I will tell him to go F himself live on air. So make me your senator, California. Anyway, there's other important stuff. And I pledge to you that through the course of this primary, which we will of course be regularly returning to, we're going to evaluate all of these candidates, the ones that are already declared and the ones that might come, because there are certainly others who might run. We can't go over everything Adam Schiff in one video, but I did want to start just by jumping into one topic. So what is his approach to foreign policy? I'm not saying that that's necessarily the most important thing for a senator, but it is far more important for a senator than for a representative. They're involved in treaties and declarations of war and all that. So here's some historic information on Adam Schiff when it comes to these sorts of related topics. He voted yes on a landmark measure back under Trump to boost military spending over 2 years by 11%. He wasn't the only one, of course. Nancy Pelosi also voted for the bill and wrote positively about it, saying in our negotiations, congressional Democrats have been fighting for increases in funding for defense. Well, thank God we at last have a party pushing for more defense spending, because if the Democrats hadn't done it, we probably wouldn't even have a military right now. Schiff was a yes vote on more military spending when we already spent more on our military than the next count a number of countries behind us. He voted in favor of the US invasion of Iraq. Now, granted, a lot of Democrats did, but not all of them did. Barbara Lee, for instance, spoke out against that war. He was among the right-wing minority of House Democrats who sided with Bush and Cheney over the broad consensus of Middle East experts, international legal scholars, independent arms control analysts, and others who warned that an invasion of Iraq was unnecessary, illegal, and would be utterly disastrous, says a professor of politics at University of San Francisco. In hindsight, I think those experts were onto something. It was a disaster that he voted in favor of. By the way, in December of 2016, as President Obama was preparing to leave office, Schiff urged him to veto UN Security Council Resolution 2334. Schiff was among the lawmakers who couldn't stand the idea that Israel would be censured for violating international law with its settlement building in the occupied Palestinian territories. So he wanted Obama to, as one of his last actions as president, stop even just like the speaking out against Israeli settlements, which were illegal, which were devastating, that have resulted in many people needlessly losing their lives. Schiff couldn't stand the idea, not that they would be barred from doing it, but that they'd be criticized internationally for doing it. And this is just a brief sample of who Adam Schiff is. I'm not saying he's the most conservative Democrat in the House or anything like that. On some issues, he's not the worst, but he damn sure isn't the best. And I don't just mean among everyone in the House. I mean of the declared candidates right now. So I don't know what his odds are. I haven't seen any polls, but everybody should be ready, I think, to fight this thing so that we can get an actual progressive. Miranda, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. And you can watch, ads that they put out, and you can see like the small little things that he says he did, but you have to look when you're looking at a candidate at what they've voted for and what they've actually done for you. And when you put someone like Adam Schiff up against these other nominees like Katie Porter and Barbara Lee, look at their voting history, see who's actually voted in your favor and who's actually tried to put in the work for you, and not just, if the argument is who stood up against Trump, it's all of them. So, that's sort of like a baseline given. That's not enough.
Yeah. No, I think Katie Porter might have voted for Trump in 2020. Exactly. It's like, come on, that's a constant. It's important or whatever, but it's also among the easiest things for a Democrat to do. It's good, it's important, but like, how many years do we have to applaud you for doing it? In any event, as of right now, Katie Porter's running, Barbara Lee's running. Importantly, Ro Khanna might run. And there is I'll just leave you with this, one last potential major twist that could come of this. And that is that, first of all, we don't know if Dianne Feinstein will be running for re-election again. She'd filed last year some initial paperwork, but that's not proof that she actually will. So we don't know, she might run, she might not. She might not finish her term. And if that were to happen, California Governor Gavin Newsom has said that he would appoint a black woman to fill the role, bearing in mind that, of course, right now there are no black women in the Senate since Kamala Harris resigned her seat to serve as vice president. So who would that be? I'm gonna guess, and I would love to be proven wrong, I'm gonna guess anyone other than Barbara Lee. I would assume they will desperately look for anyone else, and maybe they'll find someone who's good. Or maybe they'll find someone who their donors, and by they I mean Schiff and Newsom and Pelosi, they share a lot of the same people, would be much more comfortable with than Barbara Lee. And if they were to do that, then now it's sort of the incumbent running for re-election, and it gets more institutional support and blah, 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 blah. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as we go forward. With that, why don't we turn to other potential Senate races? Let's jump into this video.
Italian sports car, luxury yacht, more than $1 million spent on fine dining. Life's very good for Democrat Joe Manchin. While West Virginians get stuck with higher prices, smaller paychecks, and open borders. Democrat Joe Manchin and his Washington pals are living it up, and West Virginians are getting left in the dust. Tell Maserati Manchin it's time to stand up for West Virginia values.
This is nitpicking or whatever, but like if you're trying to appeal to being like a regular guy for West Virginia, why are you pronouncing Maserati like that? Like you're trying to pretend that you're the everyman, dear announcer. That seemed a little bit weird. Anyway, Joe Manchin being attacked, I don't have a big problem with that. It is interesting though that is not, an ad from like a progressive challenger or something like that. That's the Republicans attacking him. Because despite the amount of work he does on a daily, weekly, yearly basis to help out the right wing, they still want to replace him with a Republican. Never forget that. And so they're pointing out that West Virginia obviously beset by open borders, which are close to West Virginia or something. But anyway, it is a good point. He has a Maserati, he has a yacht, he is rich. He has personally enriched himself in a number of different ways. And so good to point that out. I do think though, Miranda, it seems a little bit weird to be like, look at this guy with his fancy car and he's got all this stuff. Get rid of him and bring back Trump. Bring a multi-billionaire back here who we love because of his gold toilet and all of the gold rooms he inhabits and all that. I feel like you could be consistent about whether being ostentatiously wealthy is a good thing or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's wild that to make an ad like that, you're a rich person screaming from your own Maserati at that guy in his Maserati, and you're like, doesn't he suck? Look at all the money he has as your money is flying out the window as you drive by. And the scary thing is that actually kind of works on some people when it's really quite obvious that it's just two rich people shouting for your vote so that they can become more rich. I think it's hilarious that they're really ragging on him for having money when it's coming from the people who have money and want to reinstate multi-millionaires, multi-billionaires back into the government.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, I want to give credit to someone in the audience. JFM EHL 81 says, well, first of all, you get a Blue Apron gift card because you reminded me of something that I wanted to say and then I forgot. So JFM, send in rewards@tyt.com, first name, last name, and your handle, and they'll get it to you. The comment is, I didn't hear anything about his effing coal mine, which is a great point. And it's a reminder that you got to remember, like, they want to viciously attack their enemies, but sometimes there are great ways that they can attack their enemies, but they can't because they're the same thing in that area. So pointing out the fact that he's helping to influence what our energy policy is gonna be, our climate policy, while he's owning an effing coal mine is a devastating attack, but they love the fossil fuel industry, so they can't actually talk about that. They can't talk about the fact that he has ruined Biden's agenda because they want Biden's agenda to be ruined. So there's all these avenues of attack that could be devastating, but they like those things. And it's inconvenient to point out that while they're attacking Joe Manchin and they would be happy to replace him, he's also like their best bud. And look, I don't feel like I should have to make that case. He's regularly making it himself. He just met with Speaker Kevin McCarthy to urge Kevin McCarthy to negotiate with President Biden on legislation to raise the debt limit. That may seem like, oh good, he's playing hardball. He's telling the new Republican speaker, you gotta negotiate with Biden. But in theory, the Democrats could push forward with solutions on their own. This isn't about convincing McCarthy to give in. He's trying to convince the Democrats to give in. And to his credit, he's being at least a little bit tricky about how he wants it to be done. So there's news going around today, by the way, that he believes that one way we can help to deal with some of our debt issues is by raising the cap on the payroll tax that contributes to Social Security, which I think is actually a great thing to do. And if that was the only change that Joe Manchin was pushing for, then huzzah, that's amazing, let's push forward. But that is not the only change that he wants. He wants to cut benefits for people in the future who are gonna be getting Social Security. He wants to raise the age that you can start to get those benefits. And so there's a lot of powerful people in media are doing PR for him, basically, not pointing out those other aspects of the plan, making him seem like the reasonable guy who's trying to get a deal when he's one of the only people that is pushing for a deal to need to be made with these people. The Democrats, in theory, could deal with this. He doesn't want them to do that. He wants the Republicans who are willing to explode the world economy so they can get whatever BS cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid that they want. He's the guy that's pushing for that. And again, great thing to point out, I think, as an attack against him, but not the sort of thing that the National Republican Senate Committee can actually do because they like those things. Miranda?
Yeah, I think it's funny because those are fantastic attacks, and that's probably why the ad is so bad, because they had such a limited range of attacks to choose from, and so they just had to go with whatever. They're like, oh, we could point out he's got we have that too. Oh, we could point out he made a deal with, oh no, wait, we have a deal with them too. And so there's like so many barriers when it comes to attacking someone, a Democrat who's basically just another Republican and is, you're right, best buds with you. And whenever it seems like Manchin is doing something that's like the solid fight for the people or a really good move, I mean, there's something underneath it. You have to look deeper, because whenever it's Joe Manchin, he feels so slimy to me. And so I feel like you always have to check under the hood and see, okay, why are you actually asking for that? Why are you, okay, it looks like you're playing hardball. What are you actually looking for? Because I know that's not what you're actually doing. You don't actually fight for the people, you just like money.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, there's I just saw this comment from the Doe. It says, Cenk running just to keep Schiff from winning. I would like to see a debate between Cenk and Adam Schiff. I don't think that that's going to happen. But anyway. Okay, with that, sorry, got to do it to you, but this is important and it has consequences. So let's jump into this. Trump will soon be returning to Facebook. He wanted it, and because we live in a hell world, he's gonna get it. He's gonna be back on Facebook, he's gonna be back on Instagram. That is according to Meta or whatever. And he was happy about this, but not like just happy. He had a mixed emotional response. Here's what he bleated on Truth Social. Facebook, which has lost billions of dollars in value since deplatforming, in quotation. Why is it in quotation marks? That's what they did. They deplatformed you. Anyway, your favorite president, me, has just announced that they are reinstating my account. Such a thing should never again happen to a sitting president or anybody else who is not deserving of retribution. Thank you to Truth Social for doing such an incredible job. Your growth is outstanding and future unlimited. Peace. What a nice thing to say on your way out the door. But anyway, yes, I like the little acknowledgement that truth is a thing that he was briefly doing and now doesn't care about. Also, I love that he says that it shouldn't happen to anyone unless they're deserving of retribution. And talking about those who deserve retribution is such a distinctly Christian thing. Oh, what a religious man we have here with Donald Trump. So he is being brought back to Facebook, which I guess has lost billions of dollars in value because they kicked him off. Not because almost nobody wants to be on the platform anymore and Mark Zuckerberg is burning $1 billion a month on the metaverse or whatever. Good tech read, Donald Trump. But the important thing is that he will be back, Miranda. What do you think that's going to do? What's going to happen as a result of him being back on those platforms?
Well, first of all, it makes me really glad that I'm not on Facebook anymore and I haven't been for a very long time. I think I still have an account on there somewhere with no information on it and I forgot the password. So I'm glad that I just still won't be able to see what he spews unless I need to, for my job. But I think that a lot of people, as much as I don't know anyone my age who uses Facebook, a lot of people do still use Facebook a lot more than people on Truth Social. And so I think it's giving him a nice large platform when he's deciding to run for president in 2024, which is, I don't love that. But I do love this goodbye to Truth Social as he's leaving and he was never supposed to. I don't know why they thought he'd be loyal to them. He's never been loyal to anyone but himself. And as soon as he can get on a bigger platform with more people, he's absolutely going to do that because it benefits him and screw anybody else. But yeah, I love that as he's going back to Facebook, he's like, Facebook sucks. I'm coming back to Facebook. Like, yeah, Facebook sucks because you're on it, pal.
100%. Yeah, it's terrible and you should totally follow me on it. Yes, now he's not formally leaving Truth Social and we'll be talking about that in a little bit, but who's expecting loyalty out of the guy who routinely dumps wives? It's been a decade, I'm moving on with my life. Yeah, he's gonna be really loyal to Devin Nunes. Anyway, there's another important aspect of this. With Donald Trump coming back, Facebook wants to reassure you that things are going to be different, okay? They're considering the possible dangers of giving a person like him access to millions and millions of people again, and they have some new policies. So Nick Clegg, who's the head of Meta or whatever, I don't care. He had this to say about the decision. Like any other Facebook or Instagram user, Mr. Trump is subject to our community standards. In light of his violations, he now also faces heightened penalties for repeat offenses. Penalties which will apply to other public figures whose accounts are reinstated from suspensions related to civil unrest under our updated protocol. In the event that Mr. Trump posts further violating content, the content will be removed and he will be suspended for between 1 month and 2 years, depending on the severity of the violation. So if he tries to sack the Capitol again, don't worry, we'll eventually take down the post and we might suspend him or whatever, assuming democracy survives his second coup. They go on to say, our updated protocol also addresses content that does not violate our community standards, but that contributes to the sort of risk that materialized on January 6th, such as content that delegitimizes an upcoming election, just an upcoming one. You can delegitimize the past ones, that has no consequences, or is related to QAnon. We may limit the distribution of such posts and for repeated instances may temporarily restrict access to our advertising tools. So if he posts QAnon memes, which he will, if he says that you won't be able to trust the election, which he will, supposedly they'll take it seriously. They're talking about this as a hypothetical. That's what he does. He is a grown-ass man. He is not going to change now. They just want him to be back on. And I know some people are saying they want to be back on so they can make money off of his ads. And that's true. They'll make some money, but as a percentage of their revenue, it's not that significant. I think that this is like a face-saving thing to reassure the right that they're not biased. And also they know that he has a chance of becoming president again. And if he isn't allowed back on and becomes president again, that could really hurt them potentially as the monopoly that they are. So I think there are a lot of different considerations. Miranda, do you feel reassured that he will be more controlled on Facebook than he was?
I feel so safe, so reassured. These heightened penalties, so different from the previous penalty of kicking him off of Facebook, really puts my heart at ease. He'll be banned for like a month or two, and I think that'll really teach him his lesson like it did the last time, for sure. Yeah.
I love that you get one coup free. I mean, look, to their credit, they did keep him off for 2 years. So I guess that is something, but they know what, it's not like he's moved on from the election denial. It's still core to his appeal, and it's spreading. More and more candidates are doing the same thing as him because he keeps doing them. And they're like, yeah, we've looked at the risk and we think it's good. Oh, that's very reassuring. Okay, let's briefly jump into a related topic though. We've got the video that we have here. Why don't we just throw to that?
This is about the 10th time that this story's been regurgitated over and over again, and it's kind of a classic lesson in kind of the swamp and how fake news narratives are started. What this stems from is that the Trump campaign has went to Facebook and Instagram to say, look, we need to be able to use your platform.
That is Devin Nunes facing renewed, I think, pointed questioning about the likelihood that Donald Trump is about to go on all of these other platforms. Now he pivots to Facebook because Trump did ask to be brought back onto Facebook. Facebook is letting him back on, and he will be using it for advertising. That is a convenient out in the argument for Devin Nunes. Like, oh, this is just about advertising. It's not about like reaching an audience, except the story is not about him getting back on Facebook. That's not why he's being asked these questions. It's about Trump going back on Twitter. Not only a direct competitor, if you can even call Truth Social a competitor to Truth Social, but they literally just stole everything about Twitter. They still look virtually identical. It's just far less successful. Trump obviously wants to go back on Twitter, not just for the advertising, but the massively expanded reach. And we're just like a month or two away from him having to make a decision about whether he's gonna re-up his exclusivity with them. So Devin Nunes can poo-poo those concerns or say like, oh, you're bringing this up again. But this isn't like the other times. It really does look like Donald Trump is going to start tweeting again, which would be financially devastating for Truth Social, a company that has already lost 80% of its value since last March. Miranda, I know it's tough to predict these things, but do you think that he is going to return to Twitter regardless of what Devin Nunes says?
Oh, I think I mean, I could be wrong, but I think he's absolutely going to return to Twitter. I think that he was on Truth Social because it's what he had. And he, talked it up because he was on it and he made of it what he could. But I think he absolutely is really butthurt about not being on Twitter. And the moment he can get back on Twitter, it's bye-bye Truth Social. I don't care because I can do whatever I want and I can break contracts if I want. And it doesn't matter because there's never any consequences for me. And I think he's 100% just going to jump right back into Twitter and leave Truth Social behind.
I certainly think there's a good chance. And why wouldn't he? So they started up this company and maybe it could have gotten big or whatever. Maybe every right winger could have gone there. I think that was always going to be unlikely because for the right wing, social media is partially about, being able to post, absurd racist stuff or whatever. They get off on that, but it's also attacking and trying to hurt the other side. That is one of the core appeals for them. And you can't do that on Truth Social because nobody other than, whack job conservatives are there. And so that's never gonna be enough for Trump. And I'm not saying that he'll stop posting on Truth Social. I think his tweets will automatically be reposted on Truth. That's it. I don't think he's gonna log into their app, assuming they have one. I don't think he's gonna care about it. He's going to move on with his life, and Devin Nunes is gonna be holding the smoking rubble of what that company could have been. Anyway, that is all the time we have for our first hour. Thank you everyone who's been watching and or listening, but there's a lot more news to come in the aftermath, so don't go anywhere. Miranda and I'll be back after this.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.